The life of an elf is pretty much the ideal slow life. There is no shortage of fruit to eat, and there is no need to hunt. The bows are just tools for polishing skills. Communing with the spirits lets him peek into the truth of the world. But the thing is, a slow life like this bores him. And this person is none other than the protagonist of our story, a high elf. Our protagonist is bored of his slow elf life. He was mentally 30 years old when he was born, and he is finally tired of living like that after 120 years. Right now, our protagonist is sitting on a branch of a tree while he eats a fruit and thinks about his life. After eating his fruit, he gets up and calls for the spirits of the wind, informing them that he is fed up with living an elf's life, shocking the spirits. He continues, saying that this type of life is not for him. Our protagonist also has all his memories from his previous life. The world of his previous life is full of the products of culture and civilization, and he understands all too well how scarce the simulation his current world has. The other high elves like him never know any other life. The other high elves love the forest, and they do not have any complaints whatsoever. The high elves do not grow old as they live for more than 1,000 years, and once their physical form perishes, their spirit goes on to linger in nature until the end of the world itself. The protagonist has been playing along for over 100 years with this type of life, but he has finally reached his limit. At that moment, a bird flies near our protagonist, and as our protagonist stares at the bird, he remembers how tired he is of eating nothing but fruit as he craves some meat. Our protagonist then thinks how he cannot stomach the thought of living that type of mundane life for another 800 years, or even until the world ends. So our protagonist decides that he wants to go out into the world to see, eat, and experience new things before he becomes a spirit that lives until the end of the world. He picks up a stone knife and cuts off his long hair. The elves live deep inside the forest in a place overwhelmed by the vast sea of trees called Pulha. Our protagonist does not have any idea what to expect after he crosses the elven border, and there is not any person he really wants to give his farewells to. So our protagonist gets ready, puts on a cloak, and packs his bag. He then thinks that he will meet the elves again if fate wills it, but for now, he will get moving. He decides to take a bow and arrows, a neat ivy bag stuffed with food, and also his stone knife. Half a month has passed since our protagonist left the elven barrier to wander around the world. Although the outside world is stimulating, the moment he left the barrier, he is set upon by forest wolves, and monsters attack him along the river, and sometimes the fish bite him. Although all his experiences are not happy, he is still cheerful as he happily travels around wondering what he could do with the wolf fangs and claws he has gathered after killing the forest wolf. He wonders if the larger fangs could be made into daggers or knives, and he thinks that the smaller ones could be strung together into a necklace. While wondering if he should actually learn some craftsmanship, our protagonist comes out of the forest, greeted by a stunning sight. He looks with amazed eyes as he sees the horizon stretching forever and the endless plains with a huge city at a very far distance. Our protagonist happily starts running through the plains as he thinks that the world feels endless to him. At the city gate, the protagonist is talking to a guard who is having a hard time while dealing with our protagonist. The guard then asks our protagonist if it is his first time at the human city, informing him that he needs to pay a fee in order to enter, and it is 20 copper pieces if someone has an ID, and if one doesn't, then it is 1 silver piece. Seeing the blank look on our protagonist's face, the guard awkwardly explains to him that to come inside the city, one needs something called money, and asks our protagonist nervously if he knows what money is. Although our protagonist knows what money means, he does not have any with him. Seeing the pitiful condition of our protagonist, the guard asks him if he knows anybody who lives in the city, and if our protagonist does, the guard is willing to call them to the gate for him. Although the protagonist is not happy about it, he thinks that he will have to ask the guard if he could sell the fangs to get into the city. At that moment, a girl who is also an elf calls him from behind. She is in a group of 3, which includes her, another girl, and a man. She then asks our protagonist if she could borrow him for a moment. Seeing the protagonist look confusedly at her, she takes his hand and drags him away from the others. After going a little further, she whispers to him and asks him if our protagonist is a high elf. Our protagonist, who is stunned by this sudden question, thinks how to normal elves. A high elf appears to be draped in a simmering light that is caused by the immortality of their souls, and it cannot be hidden. So, knowing that he is not able to hide it, and also since he does not want to hide it in the first place, he nods and confirms his identity, which gives a little shock to the elf. The girl then asks our protagonist what a high elf like him is doing at a human city. As frank as he is, our protagonist replies that he got bored of the forest, so he thought of taking a look around outside. This came as a bolt out of the blue for the girl, as our protagonist happily introduces himself as Aesir. The girl awkwardly says that she understands, but our protagonist thinks that the girl is thinking of him as a freak. Seeing the girl's expression changing too much, Aesir thinks that the girl has lived in the outside world for too long, and that even elves could be changed by their environment. And while Aesir is thinking that, the girl suddenly calls him in a formal tone, as she calls him a noble and asks for his forgiveness, saying that fate has led her there to lend assistance to Aesir. She then introduces herself as Arena. Aesir happily agrees, as he extends his hand towards her and shakes her hand, saying that there is no need for her to call him noble. But when Arena sees Aesir's extended hand, she immediately kneels on the ground and kisses the back of Aesir's hand. Aesir is dumbfounded as his extended hand was meant for a handshake, but he thinks that it is all right as he really appreciates her help. But he also thinks that he will ditch her as soon as he is past the gate, as her actions are gathering too much attention. After that, Arena, in the name of their 6-star team White Lake, personally vouches for Aesir's standing, and she also covers his entrance fee. At that moment, the man from Arena's group proudly explains that the 6-star that Arena had mentioned was their adventurer rank, as beginners start at 1 star, and there are only a handful of 7-star ranked adventurers in the country. So as 6 stars, they are ranked the highest in the whole of Vistcourt. Amazed at the group, Aesir claps his hands when the guard calls for him, and then, laughing, says that Aesir is able to come into the city for free just like he wanted, and then warns him that if Aesir causes any trouble, his guarantor will be held accountable for it. Aesir then reads the rules for staying at the city, and the main rules are to not steal, and to not brandish any weapons in the streets, and that non-citizens have to pay a tax to reside in the city for long periods. After that, the guard hands Aesir a paper, and tells him to write down his name on it. After finding out Aesir's name from the paper, the guard also introduces himself, saying that his name is Rodner. Rodner then tells Aesir that if Aesir runs into any trouble, he can feel free to come to him, as he welcomes him to the city of Vistcourt. Since it is his first time in a human city, Aesir is amazed at the sight as he starts looking around. At that moment, Arena asks Aesir if he has any plans about moving forward, and if he doesn't, she recommends him to register as an adventurer to obtain a form of identification. Aesir looks at her for a moment as he thinks about being an adventurer, but what he really wants to do is to make something out of the parts from the forest wolf. So, he eagerly says to Arena that he wants to go to a blacksmith, and asks her where he can find the best one in town. Arena disappointedly says to him that the best blacksmith in the city is a dwarf, and he will surely not sell anything to them who are elves. After finding out that the blacksmith is a dwarf, Aesir falls into thought, as according to the elven legend, dwarves ruin the sanctity of nature by stealing fire away and locking it inside the furnace. And putting myths and legends aside, elves and dwarves do not get along at all, and the dwarf may refuse his service just like Arena had said. But Aesir does not want to give up as he says to Arena that it is cool as he is hoping to see a dwarf at some point, and says to her that if she does not want to come with him, she could just tell him where the shop is. Arena is shocked from Aesir's answer as she asks in bewilderment if Aesir does not detest dwarves. Aesir is confused as he asks Irina why he would hate someone he has never met and says that it is weird. Irina is dumbfounded from Aesir's answer as she thinks that elves evolved to hate dwarves, as the metalworks that dwarves created frightened the forest trees. But Aesir has a different opinion, as he thinks that he could understand about axes. But he does not know what is so scary about tableware, and thinks that elves just hate dwarves, and that is all. Aesir realizes that it is night, and says that it is a bad time to visit the shop, as he says to Irina that he wants to stay in an inn. But he has no money, so he asks her if she would buy this from him, while taking out a fruit and placing it in Irina's hand, and says that humans could make a rejuvenation elixir from it, and the fruit would be some help to her. But Irina gasps as she is shocked once again when she finds out that the fruit is an alpia fruit. Alpia fruits are an elf's favorite food, and since Irina has helped him get into town, Aesir decides that he would give another one for free and thanks her, saying that she is a great help. Irina's voice is quivering from her shock as she stutters, and says to Aesir that he should not show the fruit so easily, and she has to teach Aesir a lot about money and how to live in a human territory, and she shouts at him, saying that the blacksmith could wait until after that, and angrily asks Aesir if he understands it. The nervous and scared Aesir agrees to her, as he thinks that he is going to learn a great number of things from Irina tomorrow. The next morning, Aesir visits the blacksmith store. He excitedly calls for someone, but he finds that no one is in the store. Aesir hears clanking sounds from the back of the store and thinks that the dwarf is busy. At that moment, his gaze falls on a beautiful knife hanging on the wall. While he is admiring the knife, the dwarf comes from the back of the store, apologizing to Aesir for keeping him waiting. Seeing Aesir looking at the knife, the dwarf says that Aesir has a keen eye. But the moment the dwarf gets a good look at Aesir and finds out that Aesir is an elf, he gets furious. He asks why a filthy elf like Aesir is in his shop, and says that he does not want to sell anything to knife ears like him. But Aesir, not minding the insults from the dwarf, smiles as he greets the dwarf, calling him rock muncher. He then looks at the knife hanging on the wall and says that it is a very fine kukri knife, and that he is not here to buy anything. He then says that he already knows what kind of knife he wants as he pauses and takes out a bottle, saying to the dwarf that he has brought a little something for him. The dwarf awkwardly, but hurriedly takes away the bottle from Aesir, saying that it is very kind of him. But the next moment, he gets furious again as he grabs Aesir by his collar and scolds him for calling him a rock muncher, and angrily says to Aesir about what would Aesir know about good alcohol. But Aesir's smiling face calms down the dwarf as he asks Aesir what he wants, and if Aesir is just trying to bore him, then he would toss him out of his shop. Aesir takes out a fang from the forest wolf he had taken down and shows it to the dwarf, saying that he wants to craft a knife from it. He says that he had killed the wolf, so he did not want its parts to go to waste. The dwarf asks Aesir if he is really foolish, and says that the fang of that size could only be from a grand wolf, and it is not the kind of thing an amateur like Aesir could work with. Aesir smiles at the dwarf as he says that it is exactly why he wants to learn from the most skilled dwarf in town, and as he did not take the pelt or meat from the wolf, he wants to at least put the wolf's claws and fangs to use. The dwarf sighs as he says that he would be able to work on the fang himself, and says to Aesir that with as strong as Aesir is, Aesir could lead a good life by being an adventurer. Aesir gets surprised by the dwarf's words, as that means the dwarf is willing to craft weapons for Aesir. So Aesir happily shakes his head, as he says that he does not want to be an adventurer just yet, and he wants to craft knives and other things from the claws and fangs, as he is interested in smithing, and he would be willing to learn for 10 to 20 years if the dwarf is up for it. The dwarf cannot help but look at Aesir with shock in his eyes as he sighs again and says that Aesir is not stupid. He is plain crazy, but he still accepts Aesir, saying that he could work with someone who is crazy much better than a haughty person, and says that he would teach Aesir smithing, as it would be a shame if those materials that Aesir acquired went to waste. Aesir then thinks that no matter what path one takes, even if they do not understand it, The path would always intersect with those of others. Thinking that, Aesir extends his hand towards the dwarf, who thinks for a moment before nodding and shaking his hand with Aesir. After a while, Aesir is with Irina and is explaining what had happened with him and the dwarf. Irina says that she understands the situation, but she is quivering and sweating as she asks Aesir why he is tending shop in a dwarf's store. Aesir looks right at Irina as he plainly says that because he would make money if he did it, and the inn that Irina had put him up for was very extravagant. Irina thinks that he is talking about the living condition of the inn, as she says that it is naturally like that. But Aesir, on the other hand, is dreaming about the different dishes at the inn. Aesir then says that he is not able to right now, but once he has enough money to be independent, he would definitely pay Irina back. Irina then clenches her fist as she starts trembling as she says that it is beside the point, and if the stench of iron gets on Aesir, he would frighten the trees, and the spirits would hate that. She angrily asks Aesir what would happen if the spirits abandoned him entirely. Aesir then explains to Irina that she is probably mistaken, as the spirits do not really hate the scent of metal at all. And although the trees hate being chopped down by axes, they are not that fragile. Aesir then thinks that the spirits were probably upset by mine pollution at one point, and once someone else learned that, maybe the elves got the impression that the spirits hated the metal unconditionally. But to prove his point, Aesir says to Irina that he could keep a potted plant in the store, and he bets that he would get along just fine with it. Aesir then asks Master Rock Muncher if he could keep a potted plant in the store. Rock Muncher just HMPHS at him, which Aesir guesses it means that he could do as he pleases. Aesir then looks at Irina, who is having a hard time digesting the information. So he says to her that he could teach her more about the spirits, and says to her that since she is already in the store, she could buy something, and he recommends her the kukri that is hanging on the wall. Irina takes a look at the knife as she says to Aesir that he is right, as the knife is quite impressive, and she can see that it is dwarven made, and asks if Aesir would be upset if she bought it. Aesir happily says to her that he would only be upset if Irina neglected to maintain it, and asks her to treat it with care. Irina then says to Aesir that he can see many things that she cannot, and then she denies it, and says that Aesir can see things that Irina does not try to see. She then looks towards Aesir as he smiles, and asks him if she can buy the kukri, and that she would cherish it. Aesir packs the knife for Irina, as he thinks that although the step is small, it would help to calm the enmity between elves and dwarfs. A high-quality weapon being wielded by a skilled adventurer, that in and of itself is enough to be happy about. After that, Aesir has been living in the city of Viscount for a full year now. Irina and her team, White Lake, come by to buy and repair their equipment. The store has been getting more customers as well as employees, and Aesir has gotten to the point where he could hammer out nails. But a shortage of metalware is causing a lot of grief in the town. So the friendly neighbors are requesting Aesir for pots and pans from Rock Muncher. And since Aesir can make nails at most, he told his master Rock Muncher what the people were saying. To which Rock Muncher replied that if Aesir wanted to help those extra customers, he should do it by himself. Making nails is fun for Aesir, and the more he works, the more he gets paid. But Irina is still covering the majority of his living expenses, and according to what she taught Aesir about how much money was worth, lodging costs about yen 50,000 for one night. Irina is paying him in the name of tuition fees as he is teaching about the spirits, and he has even complained to Rodner about this. Rodner has laughed at the story, and said that Irina is Aesir's guarantor, and she cannot just leave Aesir alone, and if Aesir really wants to leave the inn, then Rodner could set him up with a safe place, and it would also put Irina at ease. Having people like Irina, Master Rock Muncher, and Rodner with him, Aesir thinks that he has been truly blessed with all those connections. Currently, Irina and her team are out on a long-term mission, and he would talk to her about it once he comes back, and he is positive that she would agree with him this time. One day, while Aesir is working in the store, he sees the store door open with a slam and sees that it is Martina from Irina's group. Seeing her, Aesir happily welcomes her back, and he is going to ask her something when Martina shouts at him in a desperate tone as she holds Aesir's shoulder and says to him that they need Aesir's help to stop a spirit that had gone out of control. Aesir looks at Rock Muncher, who nods his head, and Aesir tells Martina that they should talk somewhere else. Aesir leads Martina to his room at the inn as she explains what had happened to them. Irina says that the White Lake had received a request from the town of Garrelet, which is a bit over 2 weeks away. Irina was specifically requested because it involved a spirit. And what had happened in Garrelet was the river in Garrelet had been contaminated, and the water spirit was out of control, and they asked the White Lake to end its curse. Irina says that one of the city's residents had angered the spirit, and anyone who drank the water fell ill for no discernible reason. And the odd thing was that while the fish were dying in great numbers in the river, the surrounding vegetation was fully unaffected. Aesir realizes the situation as he thinks about how it is impossible for a water spirit to contaminate the water it actually inhabits. And this is not a curse at all. It is pollution. Garrelet was a new town established where rich mineral veins were discovered 10 years ago. So that means all of the harm caused by the mine's pollution was being blamed on the water spirit. Aesir then asks Martina what kind of person the Lord of Garrelet is. Martina replies that the Lord is a newly established noble family, and he was appointed by the king and is very eager to expand the mining operations. Aesir thinks that the Lord knows what the problem is and wants to deflect the blame. But maybe the Lord is not aware that it is an environmental issue at all, and Aesir wonders how the Lord wants the White Lake to fix it. Tears well up in Martina's eyes as she says that right now Irina is doing everything she can to appease the vengeful spirit in Garrelet, and Kreyas is staying behind to guard her just in case. Aesir asks if Martina had hurried back all the way to ask for his help, to which Martina nods. Aesir then falls into the thought about how it is a serious predicament. Aesir feels it good to hear that Irina's ability to commune with the spirits is steadily growing, even in spite of the circumstances. And if all Irina wants to do is to fulfill the request, he could have done it, because destroying the water in which the spirit dwelled would temporarily prevent the spirit from having any influence over the world. And it sounded like Irina fully understood the problem and moved to rectify it. And he was glad that Irina's first instinct was to try and befriend the spirit. Aesir then says to Martina that he would help, and he would give his help freely, but they are going to need to talk to one more person. As dwarfs have been working with metal since time immemorial, Aesir thinks that if anyone would be most well-versed in the harmful effects that metals could have, it would be dwarfs. And thinking that, he says to Martina that they are going to need to seek the help from Master Rock Muncher. After that, we see Aesir and Martina explaining the situation to Rock Muncher at the forge. Rock Muncher understands the situation, and says that if someone from the Blacksmiths Guild would look into the matter, the truth would make its way to the king for sure, and he then says that because of that, he would go and investigate it. Hearing this, Aesir and Martina are both shocked as Aesir hurriedly says to Rock Muncher that they just need his help to refer to a guild member, and that Rock Muncher cannot leave the shop unattended for so long, and that they can handle it. Martina also agrees with Aesir's statement as she fervently nods. But Rock Muncher just HMPHs at Aesir and says to him that it would be more accurate to say that the guild's findings would not reach the king's ears, but a dwarven blacksmith's word would be a wholly different matter. He then says that dwarfs hold great sway in the kingdom's guild, and plenty of dwarfs are members of it. But it seems there aren't many dwarfs that would actually deign to hear an elf like Aesir properly. Aesir and Martina look at each other as they happily start laughing. After that, they start moving quickly from there. And the next day, Aesir explains the things to the employees of the shop, as the employee says that it is also a problem for all of them working there too. And if the Garrelet mine closed up, the price of metals would also balloon, and this would spur opposition to developing any new mines regardless, and it would affect all of them directly, so they asked them to be careful. After that, Rock Muncher separates from Aesir and Martina, saying that he would first head to the Royal Capital's Guild. Aesir thinks that Garrelet's lord is a problem, but he is sure that Rock Muncher would take care of it, and as a high elf living in the world of men, he would only do what an elf could do. Aesir's journey towards Garrelet begins with Martina leading the way. After traveling through the forest, they find Kreyas sitting near a bonfire. Kreyas's face has lost all its luster, with cheeks sunken in and dark circles under his eyes, and the moment he sees Martina, all his tension goes away as he slumps down. Martina hurriedly takes care of Kreyas as Aesir thinks that Kreyas must have been holding the fort down there, and beyond that point is the forest surrounded by an inhospitable mist. If any human were to set foot in there, the mist would begin to condense into water in their windpipe, effectively drowning them. The round trip for Martina to come fetch him is nearly a month long, and staying there for all this time would be tiring. Aesir then sits with Kreyas and Martina, telling them both they've done a great job, and that just as soon as Irina returns, they'll go somewhere safe as the place is not suitable for humans. Aesir bids goodbye to Kreyas and Martina as he travels further. After some time, Aesir finds Irina, apologizes to her for the wait, and tells her that she has come so far in such a short time, making him proud to call her his acquaintance. The moment she sees Aesir, she starts crying, telling him to go back. Aesir consoles Irina, saying that it's all fine and asking her to leave the rest to him. He then tells Irina that she was paying all his lodging fees, and he should do the least to earn his salary. He tells her to go back as her teammates are waiting for her. Irina wipes her tears as she goes to Kreyas and Martina, while Aesir thinks about how a high elf becomes an undying spirit after death. And so the elf and the spirit effectively have the same rank. An elf like Irina may request things of his spirit, but may not be able to reprimand it, and so it's about time for him to tag in. Aesir then asks the spirit what had angered her. The spirit tells Aesir her tale about how long ago the indigenous people that lived there respected nature deeply, and that reverence extended to the spirit of the spring. They had even defied the spirit. One day, the land was invaded, and the tribe's survivors had been integrated into the new culture, but they never gave up on their faith. However, the tribe's descendants were deeply opposed to the mining project, and as a result, they found themselves exiled. The spirit could not involve itself unless specifically entreated, but the tribe did not wish to involve the spirit in this dispute. So the spirit decided that for herself, for her beloved people, and for the land itself, she could not allow the pollution to continue any further. It was at that time a precious sapling had appeared before her, which was none other than Irina, and that settled it. So for the sake of the precious girl and the world she lives in, the spirit had decided that the evil must be washed away completely. Aesir realized that the spirit had completely made up her mind, but so did he, and he was wholly sympathetic to how the spirit felt, but he had decided that he would turn the tide in his favor. Aesir then explains to the spirit, saying that he understands her anger well, but if the spirit went through with her plan, the weak and the righteous would also be swept away, so she must not direct that anger towards them. He explains that the workers who work with only the purest intent know what harm their actions are bringing. There are also innocent babies who are yet unknowing of good or evil, and mothers who are painstakingly nurturing those babies, especially the children who are there now. And the spirit's beloved people are effectively indistinguishable. Aesir then says to her that if the spirit thoughtlessly washed away all the people, she would no longer be the spirit they had revered. The spirits then thought back to her time when the children had played with her, and how the people were happy as they thanked her for her blessings. Aesir then says to the spirit, who has now calmed down, that he has a friend who is working to rectify the pollution, so he requests her to not direct her anger improperly. After that, the town of Garrelet is saved, and the blacksmith guild is working on a solution for the mine as they speak, and it's all the courtesy of Master Rock Muncher, and any further development of the mine would need their approval. The true cause of the incident is cleared up to the public, and the White Lake has successfully completed their request. The noble lord is held fully accountable for the issues with the mine and dismissed from his position, and the indigenous tribe's exile is nullified, and Aesir hopes that they can return with nothing to fear. Some time later, the former lord kills himself in his own bathtub, and the king Ludria, who had appointed him, drowns in his bathtub 3 days later. The dismissed lord held a grudge against the king, so there is a rumor floating around that says that the lord gave up his own life to place a curse on the king. But the truth still remains grounded in the murky depths. 3 years after Aesir has started smithing, when he is able to start working on weapons and armor, he happens to meet a boy. The boy is too excited as he shows Aesir a mace, and says that he wants to buy it, and eagerly asks if there is any armor that would go well with it, as he hands Aesir a coin purse, and says that's how much he can spend on it. The mace is made by Aesir, so he recommends to the boy that if he could use the mace with one hand, it would still be good, and leather boots would help keep him stable. Aesir thinks that the boy has a solid core, and he would make a fine adventurer, and if things went well, the boy would save up the money he earned, and would come back for even better equipment. And if that happened, the boy might even pick out Aesir's work again, and he would really like to see that. The eager boy who had bought from Aesir, his name was Astor, and Aesir is looking forward to seeing him again. After that, Aesir's days go by learning things from Rock Muncher and spending times with the others. His daily life contains smithing at the forge, repairing things for the White Lake, and spending time happily with the neighbors. It has been 10 years since he began learning smithing, and Aesir has come across a shocking news, which is that Master Rock Muncher is getting married. Aesir asks him about it in shock, and Master Rock Muncher replies that he has got a fiancée, and he is being called to take over the family business. Aesir asks how old Rock Muncher is, and he replies that he is 90. 90 years old for a dwarf is roughly equivalent to a human's late 20s. Aesir thinks that Master Rock Muncher is so young, and to which Master Rock Muncher says to him in a huff that Aesir needs to think about his own future someday. Aesir then thinks that either way it is getting about that time. Master Rock Muncher has taken on a lot of people that decade, and many of them are skilled enough to run their own business now. And even if Master Rock Muncher left, this court won't be hurting for blacksmiths at all. Aesir thinks that the seeds Master Rock Muncher spent so much time sowing have grown into wonderful trees. Apparently, one is only supposed to start apprenticing to a dwarf after already becoming an accomplished smith. And Aesir gets that being a total amateur like him learning from a dwarf was just him being arrogant. And yet Master Rock Muncher took him all the same, and he thought that they had a real connection. The number of blacksmiths wasn't the only thing that had changed in the past decade. The White Lake had also risen to the very top, becoming a 7-star ranked team, and disbanded 3 years ago. The warrior, Kreyas, and the priestess Martina had gotten married and retired at their peak, hoping to train the next generation. Aesir thought that was the right way to do it. The elf Irina had left town to search for new companions, saying that adventuring was too exciting, and she was not done yet. Irina bid Aesir farewell with a smile, and saddled him with so many warnings that he felt like she was his mom. And also, the very first person he had met in the town, Rodner, had risen through the ranks and had become the captain of the guards. Even now, Aesir still enjoys sharing a bite and drink at the cafeteria with Rodner. The boy Astor had also developed into a warrior in his own right, and had become a 5-star ranked warrior. He still had ways to go to reach the level of White Lake, but he was a solid adventurer. So much had happened in the past 10 years that the life he had lived for 150 years prior did not even compare to it. Rock Muncher then asks Aesir what he would do with himself after he went back to the kingdom of dwarfs. Aesir replies that he would train in swords and sorcery, and he would find places to learn that in the royal capital, as he had a lot of money saved up. Master Rock Muncher sighs as he asks Aesir if the spirit stuff Aesir did was not kind of like sorcery. He then says to Aesir that Aesir is as inscrutable as ever and says that Aesir could do whatever he liked. Master Rock Muncher then adds in a heavy tone that Aesir was without a doubt his best pupil, and he would always be Aesir's friend, and that would never change. Aesir laughs heartily as he says that it was not like Master Rock Muncher at all. Tears come out of Aesir's eyes as he says that a high elf such as himself was not going to be visiting the dwarven kingdom anytime soon, and that said Asvald, which was Master Rock Muncher's real name, was Aesir's master and a friend that he would never forget. Asvald then shakes Aesir's hand and says that Aesir is acting out of sorts, and that he would say that Aesir's forte was rushing headlong wherever he pleased. After that, Asvald punches Aesir in the stomach as he tells Aesir to give it 50 years, and to come by the dwarven kingdom after 50 years, and if him, the best blacksmith in the country, would be crowned king. Then once he had gotten the throne he would make it so elves could come and go as they liked, and once Aesir visited, he should stick out his chest and introduce himself as Asvald's apprentice. Tears do not stop falling from Aesir's eyes as he thinks about how smithing was the be-all and end-all in dwarven culture, and one could achieve any social standing with skill alone, and shockingly enough they could achieve even the crown. After that, Aesir says to Asvald that he can't let himself get rusty, so he would keep on improving, even if it was just one single step. The blacksmithery that Asvald had left behind was taken over by one of his pupils, and Aesir had borrowed the forge for just a moment so he could craft his knife. Asvald had officially licensed Aesir as an advanced rank blacksmith, and he had literally pried it from the hands of the dwarfs at the guild. Aesir adds his license and the grand wolf knife to his luggage as he again sets out on another journey, and it is this time to the royal capital. The royal capital is about 10 days away by carriage, and even longer on foot. But since he has the chance, he thinks that he would walk there and reminisce on these last 10 years. And so, Aesir's journey towards the royal capital begins. Aesir has finally reached the royal capital of Ludria-Warfiel. At the city gate, where his ID is checked, the officer is shocked to find a blacksmith elf living in a human town, and he's at the advanced rank at that. After learning that Aesir is at the royal capital to learn about swords and sorcery, the officer remarks that Aesir is quite eccentric before welcoming him to the capital. The royal capital, Warfiel, is located right in the center of the kingdom of Ludria. Although it's probably obvious, the royal capital is a lot busier and wealthier than the city of Viscount, and there are a lot of schools of swordsmanship here too. There are 3 main schools to learn swordplay from in the royal capital, collectively known as the 3 disciplines. The first is the Ludrian kingdom style, a balanced sword and shield type. Many soldiers and nobles use it, but it's pretty standard, so Aesir isn't really interested in it. The second style is the Lodran great sword style. It's a 2-handed style that uses ramming with one's own body, and kicking is also used. This is the style used by Krayas. And the last one is the Gren style, which focuses on absolute defense to overwhelm the opponent. But this style doesn't fit Aesir at all. Aesir then remembers that he had heard about one more style, but the style had fallen apart due to a lack of disciples. Aesir then falls into thought of picking a style, and he thinks that if he has to pick one, then maybe he would choose Lodran. At that moment, Aesir's eyes fall on a group of street performers. He's looking at a girl who is wielding a sword when she suddenly takes the sword out of the sheath and slices an apple cleanly in half. Aesir is shocked as he thinks that it's impossible because the blade the girl is holding, although not dull, he wonders how the blade could have made such a clean cut. Aesir then dismisses his doubts as he thinks that he has seen it with his own eyes, and he cannot doubt the beauty of the girl's swing. Aesir then goes near the girl as he places a silver piece on the table in front of the girl. The girl is shocked to see a silver piece as she thanks Aesir. But Aesir hurriedly interrupts her as he bows his head down and loudly says that the girl's techniques have completely stolen his heart and requests her to take him as an apprentice. The girl is confused, but Aesir keeps insisting hard to take him in. The girl falls silent as she's having a hard time. But Aesir says that although he does not know the name of the style the girl practices, he wanted to be someone that wielded it. Aesir says that he would pay tuition and keeps on insisting her take him in. The girl is still confused, but Aesir keeps requesting, and she finally agrees. She tells Aesir that she will take him to her dojo, and tells him that once Aesir sees it, he would surely change his mind. But Aesir does not mind her words, as he is simply happy that the girl agreed. But once Aesir reaches the dojo, he is shocked as the dojo is in shambles. The girl explains that one of the 4 disciplines was taught here once, and the place was Yosogi Ryu Dojo. But the school's head was defeated by Lodron, and they were using fake swords, but he was struck so severely that he lost his life. The other pupils meant to retaliate, but there was a great deal of infighting over who should succeed as master, and thus their revenge was crushed, and the dojo never recovered. The girl's mother and her were overlooked and spared, thus marking the end of what once Yosogi Ryu was. Aesir is confused about why the girl is saying that it once was. To which the girl explains that Yosogi Ryu now only has value for spectacle, not for combat, as her style is all that she has left of her father's teachings, and she has developed it in her own way. She then says that learning their style only would draw undue attention from the Lodron school, so Aesir should leave. But Aesir says with confidence that it is fine as the style she showed off is exactly what he wants to learn. And although he does not know how strong the Lodron students are, he is not scared. Aesir then says to the girl that before they start, she should let him work on her sword for a week, as her current sword cannot keep up with her. The girl is soft and asks just who Aesir is. So he introduces himself and says that he is a high elf, and his name is Aesir. He specializes in archery and spirit communing, and he is also a dwarf-accredited advanced rank blacksmith. And he is going to be the girl's first apprentice, the very first apprentice of the reborn Yosogi Ryu school, and asks if it is all right with her. At that moment, a lady comes from behind and asks the girl, whose name is Kiha, if they have a guest. Kiha then replies that they would be taking Aesir officially starting today, and Aesir would be staying in the guest room. This comes as a big shock for both Aesir and the lady. After that, things start getting really busy. Kiha's mother is suffering from a chest ailment, so Aesir goes into the forest to find medicinal herbs for her. Kiha's street performing was all to pay for her mother's medicine in the first place, so Aesir, who is an expert in this field, tries to save both Kiha's time and money. Aesir then starts going to the blacksmith's guild when he has free time. He works on Kiha's sword as well as his own, and also starts taking jobs at the guild too. Aesir has realized that he should make some connections while he is there, as that would come in handy at some point down the line. On the way back to the dojo, Aesir has spread the word that an elf has enrolled in the Yosogi Ryu school, and he has done that because he wants to draw the attention of anyone opposed to the idea of the 4th discipline seeing a revival. He has wanted to do that as to draw people to him like moths to a flame. And if anything were to happen to either of Kiha's mother and her, then it would disrupt Aesir's training, and regardless of that, it is his job to protect them, and he is just doing what he wants to do. But because of that, he does not have any time to learn, so Aesir thinks that he could hold off on learning sorcery for a couple of decades. In the meantime, Kreyas has sent a response to his letter. As Aesir had preferred that they did not get too much attention from Lodron students, so he wanted to get a former 7-star ranked member to ward them off. But Kreyas' letter shocks Aesir, as Kreyas has requested Aesir to leave dealing with the Lodron school to Kreyas, and if anything at all happens, he has requested Aesir to contact him before Aesir goes to demolish any Lodron buildings. He has also said that he would send a letter right away, and that he is going to be in Werfiel soon to talk to the Lawrence school in person. Aesir is shocked as he wonders about what kind of guy Kreyas thinks him to be. Aesir thinks that the friction with the Yosogi school was while Kreyas was on an adventure, and thought that Kreyas was still a student of the Lodron school, and wondered how Kiha and her mother would react if Kreyas came there. Relationship between people were so delicate that they could be difficult to handle, and Aesir now understands why elves choose to be so reclusive. But Aesir wants to interact with people, as after all he had never seen anything quite so lovely as the smile of Kiha. After that, Aesir's training finally begins, and it is a pretty simple affair. And it boils down to practice swings, and all he does is mimic Kiha. Kiha has never taught anybody before, so this is their only real option. And although it is not how one goes about teaching an amateur, it is just right for Aesir, as he thinks that it is just like smithing as one makes adjustments here and there, little by little until they are done. About half a year later, after his training has begun, Kreyas drops by. Kreyas has stopped at the Lawrence school before coming to the dojo. He listens to what Kiha has to say, and as he is Aesir's senior, Aesir has opted to stand behind him. Kreyas's head bowed his head down as he has apologized to Kiha and her mother for all the grief the school has caused them. Kiha and her mother are very happy as they seem to see Kreyas as the noblest kind of warrior, and Kreyas has ended up staying the night in the guest room. The next morning when Kreyas is leaving, Kiha asks Kreyas to fight with her for a practice round, and Kreyas agrees to her. And the result is that Kiha is totally helpless before Kreyas. Kreyas then explains to Kiha that the only thing he can say about Kiha's current level of swordsmanship is that it is lacking. He then explains to Kiha that something that he has, and she doesn't, is that he has real-world practical experience. Aesir has also realized that, and he thinks that if Kiha's sword mastery is imperfect, then his would be too. And Kreyas has also recommended Kiha that she should spend 1 or 2 years as an adventurer. Kreyas then laughs and points at Aesir and says that Kiha has the strongest person he knows by her side the whole time. One night while Kiha and Aesir are practicing, Kiha says to Aesir that he has been doing favor after favor for her. The first one was her sword, then her mother, and after that Kreyas as well. She then asks Aesir's forgiveness and requests him that if he allows, she would ask him one more favor and says that she is going to become an adventurer and requests Aesir to look after her mother. Aesir thought that as long as he is concerned, the path of the sword overlaps 1-to-1 with whatever path Kiha takes. So before agreeing to Kiha's request, he says to her that he has 2 conditions. The first one is that he will make her a set of armor before she leaves, and the second one is that he wants her to use his home in Viscount as a base of her operations. Kiha agrees to Aesir's conditions, and Aesir thinks that Kiha is still a very naive young girl, and if she lives at his house, he is sure that all the people he knows would be able to look after her, and hopefully, Kiha could still manage to train and temper herself, even while adjusting to her new life. Kiha then holds Aesir's hand as she thanks Aesir and promises him that she will become a swordswoman worthy of being Aesir's master, and asks him to wait a little longer. After that, 3 years went by since Kiha left, and he is in a completely renovated dojo doing his usual practice swings. He has sworn to protect Kiha's mother, so he has not left her side. So he has a forge built on top of repairing the dojo. And since Kiha has left while the dojo was being torn down, so she has never gotten to see it finished. Aesir's blacksmithing skills have also improved since he has started his training, and he is even asked to participate in a competition, presenting his best work to the king. Last year, he has placed 3rd, and this year, he has placed 2nd, and the only people to beat him were dwarfs. And he thinks that maybe it is the reason he has been getting bothered by nobles and hooligans alike. Aesir is getting requests to make swords, to come to the people's lands, and to visit dinner parties, and so on. But once the people realize that Aesir is more stubborn than a dwarf, they have left Aesir alone. At that moment, Kiha's mother comes and calls Aesir, saying that a letter has come from Kiha. Every 2 or 3 months, a letter from Kiha arrives with stories like the first time she ate meat of the bone with her hands, or the time when an adventurer that was accompanying her had proposed to her. Kiha's mother wonders what could be in this letter and thinks if Kiha has ranked up again. In her first year, Kiha had gotten to 4 stars, and in her second, she had ranked up to 5 stars. Kiha is moving very quickly for someone operating solo, and Aesir worries that she is doing too much too quickly. But he knows that Kreyas is watching over her, and what is happening now is that Kiha's solid foundation is rapidly blooming because of all the practical experience. And Aesir is getting jealous of the fact that Kreyas is able to see that firsthand. And while reading the letter, Kiha's mother yelps in shock, and Aesir hurriedly asks her what the letter said. And Kiha's mother happily replies that Kiha had been promoted to 6 stars, and also that very soon Kiha would be coming back home, and that they would be able to get to see her again after 3 years. At the dojo, Aesir is working on something in the forge when Kiha's mother calls him for dinner. Ever since Kiha's mother received the letter, she has been making a feast every single day. And since Aesir cannot just let it all go to waste, he eats every last bite and desperately hopes that Kiha comes back even more every time. Aesir is eating dinner when suddenly a spirit comes through the door and informs Aesir about something. Aesir hurriedly jumps up, grabs his sword, and runs outside. After going out, he sees that a person is entering through the gate of the dojo. And this person is none other than Kiha. And the moment Kiha enters, she dashes towards Aesir and pulls out her sword as she attacks Aesir with it. Aesir pulls out his blade to block Kiha's attack. But Aesir's sword is not able to bear the brunt of Kiha's attack, as she cleanly cuts through Aesir's sword. And Aesir thinks that one thing he can be sure about is that the 3 years that Kiha spent weren't spent in vain. And in only 3 short years, Kiha has blossomed into a beautiful, breathtaking flower. Aesir welcomes back Kiha as he looks towards the gate where another silhouette is standing. And it is Irina. Irina comes near Aesir with her head held low, and Aesir asks her if she is in need of his power. Irina says that Aesir's guess is correct. After that, all of them sit inside the dojo. As she said, Irina is here today to request aid from Aesir, and that Kreyas had introduced her to Kiha, so that Kiha could guide her to Aesir. She then requests Aesir on behalf of all the captive elves. A handful of Ludarian nobles have been capturing and enslaving elves for bragging rights. Aesir asks Irina if it is really so easy for a person to capture elves like that. Irina asks Aesir if the only elves Aesir knows are the misfits that work as adventurers, or perhaps the elves from deep in the woods. She then explains that the common elves who live outside the great sea of trees are not accustomed to battle the way she and Aesir are. Aesir thinks about how being able to commune with the spirits is one thing, but doing that in combat is something else entirely. So it is hard for humans to capture elves through military force alone. And to say the least, the nobles have been raiding elf settlements in their territory with private armies, and because elven settlements are so insular and closed up, most people probably do not even notice it. Irina then explains how the captured elves are kept blind and are regularly drugged to keep their senses disoriented. Irina then clenches her hand as she trembles in anger and disgust, and she says that the elves without the connection can only rely on humans to fill the void, and that the elves are being treated like animals. Elves are not very malleable people, but they are certainly attractive, and Aesir cannot personally understand why anyone would want to own a slave. But he can understand why elves specifically would be valued as such. Irina then takes out a map as she explains that some of the people who are responsible are among the most important nobles in the country, with the entire eastern region under their domain. The kingdom's government must be aware of what is happening, but they have not stepped in, and Irina assures that the kingdom's government sees punishing the key figures in the country as no small matter. Secretly owning elves' lives is becoming a popular status symbol among the nobility. In fact, in reality, they may even move to make elf slavery legal in due time. So simply sneaking in and rescuing the captured elves won't be enough at this point, as the nobles who have started all this must be exposed and punished, and the kingdom would need to issue a formal apology for everything. Aesir then sighs as he looks up and says that it is not exactly Irina who has a need for his power. And humans are able to forget the pain they have endured as generations pass. So in order to ensure that elves never have to suffer anything like this again, the pain must be carved into the very kingdom itself. The elven anger the kingdom has invoked needs to be made as plain as possible, so Aesir will take care of moving the necessary mountains. Irina then trembles as she says that she would rescue the captured elves while Aesir did that. And if the facts are made clear, she can convince all the elves in the country to abandon the forests and emigrate elsewhere. Elves live in a forest where the influence of nature is very strong, and if they were to leave, the territory would be overtaken and soon overrun by monsters breeding out of control. The monsters would eventually overflow and spill out of the forest. And this is exactly why elves refuse to part with the forest they love so much. Aesir then says to Irina that he will convince the elves to emigrate as things have gotten that dire. Irina trembles as she apologizes to Aesir. Aesir then goes near her as he consoles her and asks her to lift her head, and says that if it comes to it, he would not be able to live in the country anymore. But the same is true for all elves, including Irina, and so none of this is her fault. But Kiha is shocked to hear Aesir say that as she hurriedly grips Aesir's hand, then says in a trembling voice that she still has not taught Aesir anything. And even though Aesir became her apprentice, he still cured her mother's illness, and she still needs to thank him for the past 3 years. And not only that, she also needs to thank him for even before that. And she has not done a single thing for Aesir. Saying that, Kiha starts crying heavily. Seeing Kiha hiding her face and crying, Aesir smiles as he says to her that Kiha's strike from earlier is still burned into his eyes as clear as a day. And Kiha has given him another guidepost so that he can continue to follow her lead. Kiha stops crying as she looks at Aesir and glances from Aesir's statement. Aesir then thinks about how Kiha should never say she has not taught him anything, or that she never did anything for him, as she has already done far more than he ever did for her. So he continues and says to Kiha that if it is not enough for her to continue to walk the path she has taken, she should pass it on to new disciples or her child if she has one. And then even if it may take decades, and even if Kiha is no longer with us, Aesir would still learn from someone who has inherited her blade. Like, share, and subscribe to find out in the next video. Hit the bell icon to get notified when I upload part 2. See you soon.